In the ancient mists of Middle-earth, before the days of Gondor and Arnor, and before the War of the Ring, there was an island of splendour, a land of kings and great seafarers, known as Numenor. Its glory was unmatched, its beauty a beacon in the distant seas of the world, and yet, like so many tales of old, it was a land whose fall was as magnificent and terrible as its rise. This is the story of Numenor's destruction, an epic of pride, betrayal, and doom foretold. It is a tale that echoes with the whispers of temptation, the frailty of men, and the wrath of angry gods. Numenor's creation was an act of divine grace. After the First Age, when Morgoth the Dark Lord had been cast into the void, the Valar, those godlike beings who shaped the world, rewarded the Edain, the noble houses of men who had fought valiantly alongside the elves. To these men, the Valar gave the land of Numenor, a paradise far across the sea, halfway between Middle-earth and Aman, the undying lands where the Valar themselves dwelled for all eternity. The Númenóreans were blessed beyond all others. They were given long lives, wisdom, and power over the seas. The island itself was a wonder. Lush forests, high mountains, and fertile plains stretched from one end to the other. In the heart of Númenor stood Meneltarma, the sacred mountain where the faithful would climb to offer reverence to LOTR, the one who is above all. For a time, Númenor thrived in peace. Its kings ruled justly, and the people were content. They became great mariners, their ships sailing farther than any had ever gone, spreading the light of Númenor to distant shores. And yet the first seeds of their doom had already been sown, hidden beneath their glorious reign. In the early days of Númenor, the men of the island were forbidden from sailing westward to Aman. This decree was set by the Valar themselves, who feared that men, unlike the elves, would be tempted by the immortality of the Blessed Realm. The Númenóreans were to enjoy their lives on the island, to live longer than any other race of men, but they were mortal still. Death was their gift and their curse. For a time the Númenóreans accepted this, but as their power grew, so too did their pride. They began to question why the elves were granted immortality, while they, no less noble, were destined to fade. The fear of death grew like a slow poison in their hearts, and under the reign of the later king, the once faithful people began to turn their eyes westward with envy and longing for immortality. The shadow first entered the hearts of the kings themselves. As each ruler ascended to the throne, he grew less inclined to revere the Valar. Kings no longer climbed Meneltarma to give thanks to Eru. The line of the faithful, those who remembered the grace of the Valar, dwindled in number. Instead, the kings of Númenor began seeking power and dominion over Middle-earth. The once peaceful island became a fearsome empire. And then came Sauron the Deceiver. In the Second Age, as the might of Númenor stretched across the seas, the Dark Lord Sauron, Morgoth's greatest lieutenant, rose to power in Middle-earth. He built his fortress in Mordor, crafting the One Ring to dominate all life. But when the Númenóreans arrived with their vast armies, even Sauron trembled. The might of Númenor was unmatched, and in arrogance they sought to bring the Dark Lord to heel. In a show of hubris, Ar-Pharazôn, the last and mightiest king of Númenor, led a great fleet to Middle-earth, landing on the shores of Umbar. There, with an army that blackened the land like a storm, he demanded that Sauron come before him and submit. Sauron, knowing he could not withstand such force, knelt before the king, but in his heart he smiled, for he saw the pride and vanity that had consumed Númenor, and he knew their fall was now at hand. Instead of resisting, Sauron surrendered willingly. Taken in chains, he was brought to Númenor not as a prisoner, but as a guest. With silver tongue and dark counsel, Sauron wove his lies into the hearts of men. In secret he whispered of power, of the ability to cheat death, and of the Valar's envy of the greatness of Númenor. Slowly, the king and his court fell under Sauron's sway. The Dark Lord became the king's chief advisor, and under his influence, Númenor's corruption was deepened. It was not long now before Sauron convinced Ar-Pharazôn and the people of Númenor to forsake the Valar altogether. He told them that death was not a gift, but a curse, a cruel punishment inflicted by the Valar to keep them subservient. Sauron promised that they could escape their fate, that immortality could be theirs if they would but defy the Valar and claim it. It was in the shadow of Sauron's lies that Númenor turned from the light. Temples were built not to Eru-Ilúvatar, but to Morgoth, the original Dark Lord. A great temple rose in the capital, and there the people began to offer sacrifices, first animals, and then men in the name of Morgoth. Darkness crept over the land like a sickness, and the island that had once been the pinnacle of men's achievements became a place of dread and horror. Those few who had remained faithful to the Valar, known as the Faithful, were persecuted and hunted. They prayed in secret, keeping the old ways alive in the shadows, but they were powerless to stop the tide of evil sweeping the land. Sauron's greatest betrayal had yet to come. His words had poisoned Ar-Pharazôn's heart so deeply that the king began to believe that he could challenge the Valar themselves. He yearned to claim the Undying Lands, to sail westward and conquer Aman, for there he believed he would find immortality. In his madness, Ar-Pharazôn gathered the greatest fleet the world had ever seen. Thousands of ships darkened the seas as they sailed westward, the banners of Númenor flying high in the wind. The Valar watched in sorrow as the fleet approached Aman, for it was then that they knew that such defiance could only end in ruin. When the fleet reached the shores of Aman, Ar-Pharazôn stepped onto the land of the Valar, but in that moment, something beyond mortal comprehension occurred. The Valar did not rise to meet him in battle. Instead, they appealed to Eru-Ilúvatar, the One, and in a single act of divine power, Ilúvatar changed the shape of the world forever. The seas rose in wrath. The land buckled and broke. The ships of Númenor were swallowed by waves higher than mountains. The very earth heaved and groaned as the island of Númenor, once the crown of men, was torn asunder by the wrath of the gods. Ar-Pharazôn and his army were buried beneath the hills of Aman, never to be seen again. Númenor itself sank beneath the waves, its temples, its palaces, and its people consumed by the sea. Only a few of the faithful, led by Elendil and his sons, escaped the destruction. In 9 ships they fled eastward to Middle-earth, carrying with them the legacy of Númenor. But Númenor, the island of the blessed by the Valar, was lost forever. What was once the mightiest realm of men had been undone by the pride and lies of Sauron. The world was changed, the Undying Lands hidden from mortal eyes, and the second age of the world came to its tragic close. Sauron, who had been in Númenor when the island sank, lost his fair form, but his spirit endured. He returned to Middle-earth more terrible than ever, but the destruction of Númenor had weakened his power for a time. The survivors, led by Elendil, established new realms in Middle-earth, Gondor and Arnor, the kingdoms of the Dúnedain. These kingdoms, though great, would never again rival Númenor in glory. Yet the tale of the island's fall is a reminder to all those who hear it, a warning against the lust for power, the fear of death, and the arrogance that leads even the mightiest to ruin. The sea that now covers Numenor still echoes with the voices of the lost, and sometimes sailors claim to see the shadow of the island beneath the waves, a reminder of a kingdom that dared defy the will of the gods. Thus ends the tale of Númenor, an epic of splendour, corruption, and the inescapable doom of men.